Good afternoon. My name is Richard Jones. I'm a federal judge, and I'm also the co-chair of the King County Bar Association Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Luncheon Committee. Now, this is going to be significantly different probably than any other luncheon that you participate that's sponsored by King County Bar, and not to be too much of a bragger, but I think probably of all the bar associations, this is special. This is more like a family gathering when we get together because of the message, the theme, and what we're trying to accomplish today. Now, the first order of business is, I know everybody has a tune on their cell phone that sounds absolutely incredible, but if I could have everybody just turn your cell phones off, not even on buzz or vibrate. I can't believe anybody in this room is so terribly important that you can't turn it off for at least the next hour and a half. This celebration started 24 years ago, if you can believe that. Small church, Plymouth Congregational Church, by former King County Superior Court judge, who's now retired, Judge Charles V. Johnson, and Phil Ginsburg. They will be introduced with the balance of the committee, so you have a chance to do a round of ovation. But because they are founders, Phil, would you stand up? I'm not sure if Judge Johnson's, he's not here. Thank to both of you for your inspiration, for your vision every single year. And both of them have still continued to serve on our committee. That's amazing. Now, and also a sincere appreciation to Professor Ted Shaw, our guest speaker, and his wife, Helona, who have traveled all the way across the country to be with us today. So thank you for being here today. Now, Professor Shaw, I hope that you understand that this committee, not that we've all been together for 24 years, but it seems like it sometimes, we've never had a guest speaker come back for a return visit, ever. Now, those that have been here know the amazing quality of speakers that we have, including folks that have been connected to the civil rights movement since Dr. King's time. So, Professor Shaw, I want you to know by unanimous vote of our committee, we decided that if anybody should come back on a return visit because of the knowledge, deep, deep knowledge of the civil rights movement and deep commitment, nobody could fill your shoes but you today. So thank you for being here today. I also want to pay a special tribute to your wife, Helona, because she's the one that sacrifices when Ted is out there fighting the battles. She's the one that's out there that sacrifices when he's not home. And she has to give up a lot to share him in the movement. So thank you. Now, don't put your elbows on the table yet, because we've got a few more applause to go. We have generous sponsors that give every single year to make this happen. And this would not happen without their support. So please, with all the firms and the firms who have sponsored and their representative tables, would all of you please stand up and be recognized? Please stand. I have a small problem. I saw a bunch of tables where absolutely nobody stood up. That means we have a lot of room, a lot of fields to plow in terms of opportunities for you to help make this program a great success. So we look forward to that next year. I'd also like to recognize our co-host law school, which is Seattle University Law School, because we rotate between our two local law schools to co-host with the program. This year, it's Seattle University Law School. So would Dean Annette Clark please stand and be recognized? And Dean Clark, thank you so much for hosting that very, very lovely reception last night with Professor Shaw and his wife. It was exquisite. For the students and professors that had a chance to be there, it was simply amazing. I'd also like to have anyone who doesn't have the flu, doesn't have a cold, or some other illness to please stand up, because I think that's going to be a small number. You know, Dr. King's actual birthday, as you all know, is going to be celebrated on Monday. Happy 89th birthday, Dr. King. Now, I'm not going to get in line with all the other folks that you'll read about over the course of the next few weeks or days or months that would talk about what Dr. King would say. If Dr. King were alive today, this is what Dr. King would say. And I can't imagine that nobody in this room didn't have the same thoughts that I did when you were walking up here. What would he say if he did have the opportunity to be here? We don't know. But I can tell you my thoughts in terms of my reaction would be something like, Lordy, Lordy, what the hell is going on? I've been gone for 50 years. When I left this earth, I shared my dream on equality for America. And when I came back, it was no longer a dream, it was a civil rights nightmare. Did somebody change the inscription on the Statue of Liberty to read, if you are tired, poor, or a huddled mass, you're not allowed or welcome? I'd hate for that to be the way Dr. King's legacy is fulfilled as we continue to go forward. Now, while we'll never know exactly what Dr. King's thoughts would be, I want you to know that there's a gentleman that I've tried to read the last few years, and his name is Woody W. White. I doubt that anybody even knows who he is. He's an 82-year-old United Methodist bishop in Atlanta who has been writing to Dr. King for years, and he publishes his letters every year. So I just want to share some brief excerpts from his letter from last year. And it reads, sadly, the election season and presidential campaigning were filled with ugly rhetoric of a racial and ethnic character. It seems more Americans embrace such sentiments than we realize or wanted to acknowledge. Martin, the power of racism, ethnocentrism, and xenophobia in the minds and hands of politicians and the shapers of institutions is proof such animosity can be institutionalized. That's why democracy is important. That's why elections are essential. That's why who is elected makes a difference at every level of governing. Sadly, there are those who would undo progress and who prefer exclusiveness and division to inclusiveness and unity, who prefer to erode the principles and ideals of American democracy itself. Thanks to you, Martin, and countless others, we moved from a less than great America to a greater one, to one more true to its ideal, one nation under God with liberty and justice for all. However, it is increasingly clear that there's still much work to do, more protesting, more marching, registering people to vote, and being more politically engaged. We must bring people of goodwill from all races and backgrounds to find common ground. Bishop Woody, thank you. May you be blessed and have many, many more years of opportunity on this planet. And you get the time, go and read his writings. I look forward to the ones for this year, 2018. But speaking of great and amazing people, I'd like to bring up to the lectern the co-chair. Now, Karen Murray's been doing this for several years. And I hope that you took the opportunity to read that wonderful statement about who she is, what she's done for years as a lawyer, and beyond just being a lawyer, a great person and all the work that she does behind the Dr. Martin Luther King Luncheon Committee. Can't thank you enough, Karen, and I hope you do the same. Karen?
Thank you, Judge Jones. As co-chair, I have the pleasure of introducing this year's MLK members and the KCBA staff. As I call your names, please stand and be recognized. First, a special acknowledgement for Phil Ginsburg and for retired King County Superior Court Judge, who's not here with us today because he's sick, the Honorable Charles V. Johnson, for realizing the importance of bringing us together to honor not only Dr. King's legacy, but the legacies of all civil rights activists then and now. And also, of course, to the committee members who continue to return year after year to work diligently behind the scenes to make this happen. Erica Buckley, Lisa Kas-Iyaha, Justa Gonzalez, Randolph Johnson, Carrie Keefe, James Lupson, Gregory Miller, Kevin Peck, Burns Peterson, the Honorable Catherine Schaefer, Paula V. Wahai, Leanne Wigley, and Craig Sims. Please, everyone stand. A very heartfelt thank you to KCBA, beginning with Executive Director Andrew Prazu and Senior Manager Denise Medlock for their support. And of course, the KCBA staff who continue to quietly assist behind the scenes, enabling this event to run seamlessly. Without all of you, none of this would be possible. So please acknowledge them. Now, before I introduce the Graham Hill Elementary Choir, they are back this year, and I see they probably cannot hear me because they should be walking up to the dais. So would someone open the door in the back and tell them to please come forward? Yeah, give them all an applause. We went big this year. Thank you. It's been long overdue. I would now like to officially introduce the Graham Hill Elementary Choir and its new director, Miss Heidi. That's the name she told me to go by. And of course, the music director who made this all possible, Miss Elizabeth Hogan. The choir will be performing 3 songs, starting with Lift Every Voice, the Black National Anthem. Instead of one verse, which is on your program, they're going to do a second verse, followed by This Little Light of Mine, and Ain't Gonna Let Nobody Turn Me Round. Please welcome back the Graham Hill Choir. And please stand for the national anthem. Thank you.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring with
all be seated now. Thank you.
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Way up on Graham Hill, I'm gonna let it shine. Way up on Graham Hill, I'm gonna let it shine. Way up on Graham Hill, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Every day and night, I'm gonna let it shine. Every day and night, I'm gonna let it shine. Every day and night, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me round, turn me round, turn me round. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me round. I'm gonna keep on a walking, keep on a talking, marching out to freedom land. Ain't gonna let no hatred turn me round, turn me round, turn me round. Ain't gonna let no hatred turn me round. I'm gonna keep on a walking, keep on a talking, marching out to freedom land. Ain't gonna let injustice turn me round, turn me round, turn me round. Ain't gonna let injustice turn me round. I'm gonna keep on a walking, keep on a talking, marching out to freedom land. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me round, turn me round, turn me round. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me round. I'm gonna keep on a walking, keep on a talking, marching out to freedom land.
Well, you can't say that we didn't make up for not having you here last year. Thank you. Our next presenter is someone I have come to know through the years as a very active member of KCBA and WSBA. Everything he's involved in, he does with passion and excellence. Please welcome the current president of the King County Bar Association Andrew Marin. Please welcome him.
On behalf of the King County Bar Association Board of Trustees, I want to add my thanks to each of you for coming today. It's really a pleasure to see so many of us and you turn out to honor Dr. King's legacy. Thank you very much. Many of you remember that Dr. King once said, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." As lawyers and judges, we use our training to advocate and to give voice to those who aren't being heard, whether we are in private practice or public practice, whether we are attorneys or judges, law professors or lawmakers. Our license to practice law gives each of us a unique ability to support civil rights and social justice. The King County Bar Association has been working for over 130 years to do just that. When it was formed back in 1886 to discipline lawyers who were denying the due process rights for Chinese immigrants. The King County Bar Association has proudly built a heritage of creating legal aid programs, establishing public defense offices, and for the past 50 years, we have been committed to provide scholarships to help underrepresented minority law students overcome the financial difficulties to gaining their legal education. My own personal interaction with minority law students was, of course, when I was in law school 40 years ago. I spent most of my first years after college in the southeast part of the country, in the Army, and at law schools in South Carolina and in Virginia. One of the South Carolina law school courses I took was called the Law of Race Relations. In recognition of Professor Shaw here today, I would note that that law school course was taught by two professors, one black and one white. Both had significant experience successfully litigating racial discrimination cases in the South. Upon reflection, it's remarkable that just a few years after integrating the law school, and only a few blocks from the state capitol in Columbia, South Carolina, the law school was teaching law students how to use the 1960s Civil Rights Act, civil rights laws, and judicial system to break down barriers in the country. I recall to this day advice given to me by those professors. They said, yes, you must know the law, and you must be able to make convincing legal arguments. But you must also remember to recognize and highlight that you are seeking fairness in what you are doing. Whether you're appearing in a small courthouse, a small county courthouse, or before the state Supreme Court, you must seek fairness and justice. That's what Martin Luther King spoke about in his famous quotation, and that's what our professors were teaching us. So before we get to our keynote speaker, Professor Shaw, we thought you'd like to take a few moments to hear from a recent recipient of one of those minority law student scholarships. Deborah Akbar received her law degree from Seattle University School of Law here, in 2013 while working full-time. She externed at the Washington State Supreme Court and has been active in several minority bar associations, including most notably the Latina Bar Association of Washington. She's now an associate in one of the city's oldest law firms, Helsel Fetterman, and she is someone the legal community is proud to include among us. So I want to welcome Debbie Akbar.
Good afternoon. I grew up in a low-income household, a first-generation American, the youngest of three, the first in my family to attend college. My mother was born in Mexico and grew up in a small house that was crowded with people and had a dirt floor. She came to the United States in 1961 when my grandmother met and fell in love with a blue-eyed, blonde-hair ranch hand that lived in Texas. My father, on the other hand, grew up half a world away in Iran. He came to the United States in 1978, just as the Iranian Revolution gained momentum. Growing up in a Persian, Mexican, American household wasn't always easy, and fusing those cultures was often difficult. And sometimes as a kid, I was called different or weird. As a kid, I didn't want to be different. I wanted to be normal, like my friends. Or at least what I thought normal was, which meant going to a magical place called Costco and buying bulk bagels and block cream cheese and eating it for breakfast, and then picking up a frozen lasagna to bake off for dinner. As I got older, I started to embrace and celebrate my differences, or my diversity. My diversity is why I was chosen to be a King County Bar Foundation scholar, and why I was asked to address you today. Just as other past and current scholarship recipients in this room today, I was grateful for the financial assistance that the County Bar Foundation provided. Now, upon reflection, I have a deep appreciation of what it means to have been a King County Bar Foundation scholar. It means that the Bar Foundation and its donors validated who I was and where I came from. It meant that the people in this room, the people who have become my colleagues, my mentors, my role models, and my friends, you all invested in me. You made the decision that I was worth investing in, not because I was a law student, but because I was a law student whose diversity and life experiences would enrich our community and our profession. As a law student, it was a privilege to be a King County Bar Foundation scholar. As an attorney, it is a tremendous honor to be an annual King County Bar Foundation donor. To everyone in this room, thank you. Thank you for your generosity, for creating opportunities, and for investing in our diverse law students who truly are the future of our profession. Thank you.
I got chills, goosies. We're going through a rough time in our country where people don't believe diversity is a great thing. So with that being said, I encourage all of you to give to this foundation. You just heard from Deborah, and if you didn't feel it, shame on you. We need to make a difference in what's going on, and that's what we do. So I would ask that you take the time to contribute to this foundation. Thank you. Whatever career you choose for yourself, doctor, lawyer, teacher, let me propose an avocation to be pursued along with it. Become a dedicated fighter for civil rights. Make it a central part of your life. It will make you a better doctor, a better lawyer, a better teacher. It will enrich your spirits as nothing else possibly can. It will give you that rare sense of nobility that can only spring from love and selfishly helping your fellow man. Make a career of humanity. Commit yourself to the noble struggle for human rights. You will make a greater person of yourself, a greater nation of your country, and a finer world to live in. These words were spoken by Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. on April 18th, 1959. When reading this quote, I can't help but think how it characterizes the professional life of today's guest speaker, Professor Theodore Shaw. Upon earning his JD from Columbia University School of Law, he began working as a trial attorney in the Civil Rights Division of the U.S. Department of Justice. After 3 years at DOJ, he joined the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, LDF. After 3 years at DOJ, he would work intermittently for 26 years for LDF under the mentorship and direction of LDF's third Director Counsel, Julius Chambers. Mr. Shaw advanced to Associate Director Counsel before finally becoming the fifth LDF Director Counsel. He served in this position from 2004 through 2008. During this period of time, Mr. Shaw entered the world of academia, where he held various positions: professor, department chair, and visiting scholar. Shaw held these positions at the top law schools of Columbia, University of Michigan, CUNY at Queens College, and Temple University. Because of Shaw's passion for his work and his creative success litigating cases affecting the human condition, he was frequently called upon to address local, national, and world venues concerning civil and human rights. In acknowledgement of his extraordinary achievements and accomplishments, Shaw has been the recipient of numerous awards and honors. In July of 2014, Shaw joined the University of North Carolina School of Law at Chapel Hill as the first Julius L. Chambers Distinguished Professor of Law and as director of the UNC Center for Civil Rights, where he would continue the legacy of Julius Chambers in the center's mission of dismantling structural and racialized barriers to equality through litigation. In September of 2017, the core mission of the center was gutted by the conservative UNC Board of Governors when it passed a proposal prohibiting the center's lawyers from suing. Now, Mr. Shaw faces another battle that wraps itself in all too familiar issues: civil rights, human rights, social justice. There is little doubt that he is up to the challenge. In my opening, I read a quote by Dr. King and boldly stated that our guest speaker personified the very essence of that quote, and I hold fast to that statement. Mr. Shaw's entire professional life has demonstrated that he is a dedicated fighter for civil rights, that he has made civil rights a central part of his life, and that his noble effort have indeed made our country, as well as the world, a better place in which to live. So without further delay, it is my honor and privilege to introduce Professor Theodore Shaw.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you for that generous introduction. I tell you, when you get up here and you look out and see this room, there are a lot of folks here. So it's a double honor to be here with you again. I was trying to remember when I was here for this luncheon, and it looks like it was 2007. And that was quite some time ago. The country and the world have changed a lot since then. So there's so much I could talk about, but first, I want to acknowledge that first I want to thank Judge Jones, and I want to acknowledge that when he began to speak and indicated he had something that he wanted to say to me, I was expecting him to say, this is a luncheon. It's in the middle of the day, and these are lawyers and judges, so they have to get back to work, and so you can't speak too long. But he was kind, but as judges sometimes do, I expect him to cut me off in the middle of a one-syllable word, if need be. I realize that we don't have a great deal of time. And then secondly, even with my wife Alona's stewardship, and she has a lot of better things to do than to take care of me. You know, she's on her third career, was a social worker and then a lawyer, and now a life coach. She's trying to coach me, and nonetheless, I left my glasses where they are not with me. So I want to confess to that and make you aware of that. And I also want to thank Karen Murray and President Marin of the Bar Association, Denise Medlock, who was so helpful in arranging our trip here, and all the others on the committee. I just want to say thank you to you and acknowledge you in maybe not the most personal way I can, but I want to acknowledge you nonetheless. I also have to say that when people say all these wonderful things about you, now part of it is they're reading what you wrote about yourself, and I acknowledge that. Although I often say now, and I do mean it, I don't need to hear this stuff anymore. So less is more. But I want to also acknowledge that if you begin to get the big head, people who knew you for a long time, they'll call you on it. My law school roommate, Joe Knight, Dean Knight, is here, and his wife Susan. My dear friends of about 40 years now or so, a little bit more, I think, than that. And so they'll call me on it, but also my college classmate, Linda Walton, who's somewhere right in here. There you are, Linda. I know she called me on it, and even my dear wife, Helona. So I don't have the big head. I try not to get it, but I'm grateful for this opportunity. Let me then acknowledge that there's a whole lot that I could talk about, and I'm capable of going on for a long time. I'll fess up to that. But I know I can't and I shouldn't. And so I have this dilemma of what to talk about at a time such as this. You know, the day after another instance of debasement coming from the highest office in the land. I was talking to folks, I think it may have been Denise, but it may have been others on the committee before coming out here. And one of the things that I was made aware of is the fact that this is a diverse audience in all respects, including philosophically, politically, intellectually. This is not a room that is composed solely of people who would describe themselves as liberals and progressives. I'm conscious of that. This is a room with people who are conservatives and Republicans, although I suspect maybe there's more of one than another. But I'm conscious of that. And I'm not here to talk partisan politics, and yet I'm not going to make believe that I am not who and what I am, and I don't think what I think. And I, for one, refuse to even use the title of the presidency anymore when I talk about his present occupant, because I don't think that he has carried himself in such a way as to earn that. And people may disagree. And one of the great things in this country is that we can disagree, and often do. But this is breaking my heart daily. As an individual, as an American, as an African American, it breaks my heart to see what is happening in our country and to our country. And I don't think many of us, maybe this is a bit presumptuous, I'm sure it is, but I think many of us don't begin to fully understand the damage that's being done in this country right now. And I pray that we can survive this as the democracy that we want to and claim to be. But I'm not certain. I talked last night at Seattle Law School, and I won't bother to go into the details, but in January of 2016, I wrote a post in which I talked about the danger, this is well before Trump got the Republican nomination, of his candidacy. Suffice it to say that I ended that post by saying that I'm deeply concerned and worried about what was going on in our country. And the recurring thought that I had was, this is how it happens. And so there's a great deal going on that is an existential threat, I think, to our democracy as we know it. I've had some people tell me that I was being irresponsible, that I was being paranoid, and I would like nothing more to have that proven, to be proven wrong. It is my fervent hope, it is my prayer that I am proven wrong. But I also want to talk in some ways that is a bit more personal than what I ordinarily talk about. By the way, I meant to also call the name of Lou Prichard. Where are you, Lou? Where's table one? It's somewhere. Yeah. Lou and those at his table, they are distinguished. You know them all well. But I'm so glad to see him. He was a supporter, a longtime supporter of the Legal Defense Fund, and personally supported me when I was in the role of Associate Director Counsel and then Director Counsel of the Legal Defense Fund. So I want to acknowledge him. When I was a college student at Wesleyan University in Connecticut, along with Linda, in my first semester of my first year, I went up to Smith College. We used to do what we call road tripping. We go to other colleges and visit and go to parties and things like that. And I met a young lady who became one of my dearest friends. When I first met her, I can't even remember if I knew who she was. I may have and acted as if I didn't, or I may not have known and then quickly was made aware of who she was. Her name was Yolanda King. Her family and close friends called her Yoki. And Yoki, as I said, became a dear friend. Tragically, sadly, we lost her much too early. What year was that, Lo? In 2007? 2007. And she died of a heart disorder. The great historian and biographer, Taylor Branch, who wrote a 3-volume series I hope many of you have read on America during the King years, he told how when King was autopsied, Dr. King was autopsied, the doctor, the medical examiner, said that even though he was 39 years old, he had the heart of a man who was twice that age. I suspect that he would not have lived a long life anyway, that long life that he talked about in that speech that many of us know. It wasn't meant for him one way or another. And sadly, I think Yoki inherited some of that heart condition, and it took her much too soon. But I mention this because one of the members of the King family said to me and to us a few years ago in Atlanta, he said, "Do you ever talk about the fact that you know and knew the King family?" And I said, "No, I don't." And he said, "Why not?" And I said, "Because I feel like it would be exploitative. It would be boasting about a friendship and a relationship." And during Yoki's life, I never made it a point to talk to her about her father unless she raised his name, and sometimes she did. So I didn't want to do that, but he said to me that he wished that I would. He said that it was a way of not only keeping her alive, but the vision of her father and her mother in a very personal way. Now, I don't claim that I can really do that, but that stayed with me. I've been thinking about it a lot. The other night, I went through, as I do sometimes in my study, a lot of pictures and books and memorabilia that I have. And I found notes and cards and books autographed by Yoki that she had sent to me, but also by Coretta Scott King. Coretta King autographed something, a lovely inscription. When I was in my, I think my first or second year law school, and it was a book that had the words and the speeches of her husband that she wrote the foreword to, and she gave it to me and talked about her hopes for my work. And I found another one I forgot I had, similarly, that she autographed in a very personal way, saying that she hoped that I would be inspired by the words of her husband that were in that book. I found notes from Yoki and photographs, a photograph of Helona and Yoki and me, taken at the first time that I had introduced the two of them. And Yoki pulled me aside after the end of our lunch meeting, and she said, "Marry her." Well, for reasons I won't bother to go into, it took me a while to wise up, but it's the best thing I've ever done. So in many ways, I've been blessed. You know, yes, I know that family, and I know the children have, they fell into their disagreements. Many of you know about that, some of you don't. It's painful to watch some of that. I know that took a toll on Yoki. May have had something to do with her early passing. But it is a very awkward thing in some ways to know people who are who have that kind of fame or connected to it. In fact, I became convinced, and I know this about others too, that being the child of somebody who is famous on that level is more of a curse than a blessing. It's a lot to carry. But I think about Martin Luther King all the time. I didn't know him personally. I met Yoki only a few years. He died in '68. We're now commemorating, or about to commemorate, the 50th anniversary of his assassination along with Bobby Kennedy's. But I met Yoki 4 years after Dr. King's assassination. I remember one time I was at their house in Atlanta, and she said, I want to show you something. And so I said, okay. And she took me to the garage. And the garage was just packed with stuff all around a car. It was Dr. King's car, the one that he was driving at the time that he was killed. He didn't take it to the airport. It stayed in that garage for decades. And all these boxes and boxes of papers that were his papers, the King papers, that eventually they were auctioned off. We went to the auction. It was going to be an auction at Sotheby's one night, but the papers were bought at the last minute with the guidance of the then mayor of Atlanta, Shirley Jackson. And they now sit in a wonderful museum that I encourage you to visit if you go to Atlanta. I have all those memories and many more. But I think about Dr. King, and I think about who and what he was, and I think about what he has become in America in particular, but also to the world. And sadly and tragically, the Dr. King that we hold up now as the great American, which he certainly was, is not the real Dr. King. Now that he's been safely dead for quite some time, there are many people who have hijacked his legacy, who distort who and what he was to serve their causes. They make him toothless, and they talk about him in ways that does a disservice not only to Dr. King, but to the civil rights community broadly, to the movement. The civil rights movement was not a movement in which everybody fell in line behind one leader, Martin Luther King Jr. It was a roiling, divisive movement. Not everybody, in spite of what people would have you believe, marched with Martin Luther King. Most of them didn't. Most African Americans didn't march with Martin Luther King. Many said this nonviolence business, I'm not with it. You know, if somebody gets violent with me, I'm going to get violent with them. So we have a distorted legacy of Martin Luther King and who he was. I went through a magazine I have at home, Life magazine. Some of you old enough will remember Life magazine. And it was the September 5th, I think, issue of 1963. So that's about 2 weeks or less, actually, after the March on Washington. And on the cover, the tagline was, "The leaders of the march." Martin Luther King was not in that photograph. A. Philip Randolph, the great labor organizer, was there. And Bayard Rustin, the great organizer and activist, who was ignored by history largely, who was in many ways disrespected during his lifetime because he was gay at a time when to be gay was to be shunned. The FBI tried to use his sexual orientation not only against him, but against the civil rights movement. If you know anything about the civil rights movement, if you know Taylor Branch's work or David Garrow's work, you know these things. But the Dr. King that we know about is held up as having been the leader of the march. He was not the leader of the March on Washington. He was a leader of the March on Washington. And if you opened that magazine, you saw that they talked about him as giving the strongest speech of the day, which he no doubt did. And what you see is a reference to his speech as a speech that talked about America writing a blank check, a check that came back marked insufficient funds. The speech can be called, as many have observed, the bounce check speech, as much or more as it could be called the I Have a Dream speech. In fact, he departed from his written remarks, as many of you know, when Mahalia Jackson, the great singer, said, "Tell him about the dream, Martin." And so he did. And that's what we know now. But Martin Luther King was not an idle dreamer. He was an activist. He was somebody who fought against racism and oppression. He was somebody who was against not only racism, but against militarism. You know, he paid a great price for his opposition to the Vietnam War. He was against rampant, unchecked capitalism. He believed in democratic socialism. The FBI and others went after him because they said that he was a communist, and there's a difference between those things. But had he lived, he might have been marginalized in time. You know, when he died, he was pretty depressed. Again, not everybody supported him, and there had been a new challenge to the notion of nonviolence. And so when I think about the Martin Luther King who really did the work and led the life that he left, I think about the Poor People's Campaign, his last mission. The garbage workers in Memphis whom he was supporting. People don't talk about those things anymore. Who holds that legacy now? Well, many people think about this model of activism and leadership as one person being the leader. That's not the way that movement worked. We do have some people now who walk in the shoes of that legacy. I think about William Barber in North Carolina. If you don't know who he is, I encourage you to find out who he is. And he's taken up the Poor People's Campaign again in the months to come. And we all are challenged or would be challenged to answer the question, what do we do in our time, in this time, with the politics of this time, with the open racism of this time? I said it's been a while since I've been with you. There was no black president of the United States at that time. And now we've had Barack Obama elected twice. I remember the morning of that first election. Helena and I took our daughter, our young daughter, with us to vote. And we'll tell her that for the rest of her life. And that was the first time in my life that I flew an American flag. Now, don't misunderstand me. Don't misunderstand me. I have not been a flag burner, but I also have not been a flag waver. The experience of being an African American in this country is duality, as the great W.B. Du Bois talked about, as others have talked about. It's the experience of having this complex relationship with this country. And I am not one of those fair weather patriots who say, America, love it or leave it. I don't believe in that. That's too easy. I and others, we critically love this country, which is a much more profound kind of love. We love this country not always because of what it is, but sometimes in spite of what it is. But we love this country because we love the vision of what this country claims to be and what could be, even though for the most part it has not been what it is or has been. And Lord knows now, today, in the aftermath of 2 Obama administrations, we know that we're paying a price for the election of that president. I was naive. I thought the country was going to another place. But what we're dealing with now is a direct consequence of those 2 administrations. We are dealing with a resurgence of racism and denials every day. People, it's an amazing thing. People going through all kinds of contortions to deny who and what the person who occupies the White House is and what he's doing. It's an amazing thing, but it is a dishonest discourse. So let me turn to the last comments I want to make. I'm worried about the country, but I'm also worried about the state to which I moved a few years ago. We moved a few years ago, North Carolina, where I have deep family roots, where some of my family toiled, unrequited toil. You know what I'm talking about. And I think about that all the time. And I think about the fact that in August of next year, 2019, we will mark the 400th anniversary of the presence of African Americans in this country. 400 years. Now, a few years ago, we marked the 400th anniversary of the Jamestown colony in 1607. Great celebrations. The Queen of England came over to check on her former colony. The then president, Bush 43, came to speak. There were all kinds of seminars and symposia in colonial Williamsburg. Special license plates printed. I wonder what the commemoration is going to be next year of the 400th anniversary of African Americans. I will tell you, though, that the African American experience has been the core and central experience in the definition of this country, from the adoption of the Constitution after the debates about slavery to the Civil War that we fought over the issue of slavery, right on up through the Civil Rights Movement and to the present. Just look at the issues that we're dealing with in this country. But these issues belong to all of us. They are not only the issues of African Americans, this is the American story, the American issue. If I had more time, I'd talk in a more personal way about how it impacts many of us. Suffice it to say that even my very countenance, look at me, a fair-skinned, light-skinned, freckle-faced African-American man, is a consequence of our historical experience with slavery. I have done a great deal of research. I can't find one white person, I'm not saying I'm completely done yet, but I can't find one white person in my family tree after slavery. Think about that. Think about that. And it's the experience that many of us have had. And there are white folks who don't even know who their ancestors completely were. So there's a lot for us to think about and talk about as we come up on this commemoration. North Carolina, backwoods. Joe Knight's home. Used to be the most progressive state in the South. Isn't anymore. If I had time, and I'm out of time, I'd talk about Julius Chambers, the third Director Counsel of the Legal Defense Fund, whom Lou and others knew and supported. This is a new biography of Julius, University of North Carolina Press. I encourage you to find it. Julius graduated #1 in his class in 1962. UNC Law School still segregated. Julius, editor-in-chief of the Law Review at that time. You know, if he graduated #1 in his class, I say it couldn't have been close. Julius, who changed North Carolina, the region, and the country. You ought to know who he is. And his legacy has been betrayed, or is being betrayed, by right-wing extremists in North Carolina. Yet I love living in that state. And I know that there's work that has to be done. Some people run from fires, some people run to them. The Center for Civil Rights may not be able to represent individuals in litigation and civil rights cases anymore, but that doesn't mean the center is done. We are not done. We are going to continue through research and advocacy and other forms and everywhere we can to tell a story of what happened and what needs to happen in North Carolina and around the country. So, if you don't have this book, A Testament of Hope, the words and writings of Martin Luther King, I encourage you to get it, so that at least you can understand, or we can understand, who and what he really was, what he said and what he stood for. And we can recommit ourselves to what we say we believe in, because we must believe in those things. That's why you all are here today. That's why this is King County, not that other King County that it was, but this King County. This is work that we all have to do. So, Judge, I know that I'm done. You're being kind. And there's so much more I would want to say. But I want to thank you for honoring Dr. King on his birthday weekend. I went through all of these buttons, and, you know, I could talk about my grandmother being at that march, and could talk about the marches that we did for the holiday itself. But I don't have the time to talk about that. All I can tell you is that there's still a lot of work to be done. There's a great African saying that talks about the struggle. And it talks about life has meaning only in the struggle. Victory and defeat are in the hands of the gods. So let us celebrate the struggle. That's what we're all here for. Let's find a way for all of us to play a role. It belongs to all of us if America truly is to follow the vision that we've set for ourselves. And nobody, not even this individual who occupies the White House right now, should be allowed to defile that or destroy it. It's ours. I love this country, and I know you do too. Thank you.
Professor Shaw, on behalf of the King County Bar Association and all of Seattle, we thank you for coming to our city and sharing your thoughts. The only thing that I can say is, after you finish, my only thought was, I wanted to run upstairs, get your glasses, and keep you going. As you can see, Professor Shaw has deep insight into the state of America and deep insight based upon his past experience and experiences of life. And he shared just a morsel of that with you today. Now, as you leave today and go back to your firms, you'll probably think about some of the things he shared with you today. And we have an enormous amount of energy in this room today. We've given you education. Professor Shaw has given you some assignments and some homework. And you have the opportunity to do something about what today is all about. It's not about just saying, I had a great lunch, great speaker, and go out and get some billable hours. It's about what difference can you make? You know, there's some young kids in America today that think of Dr. King as a fictionalized character because they just don't know who he is. His dream was what was up on the stage today. I'd encourage you to go to a website. It's called scholastic.com/MLK Day. And the reason I want you to go there is because it has a tutorial and it has a video that will help you provide young kids, I'm talking about first graders on up, about the education and knowledge about Dr. King. Scholastic.com/MLK Day. So don't let Monday just be another work day, a day that you get to sleep in, a day that you don't have to go to work. Make it meaningful. And make Dr. King's birthday something that we can really celebrate. I know I will. I hope all of you can as well. Thank you. Have a great afternoon.